The Coffin of Andy and Leyley is a rather controversial game that has sparked heated discussions online, and when something gets people talking, there's usually something interesting behind it. This game is no exception. In this video, I will be making an iceberg chart, so let's dive in. Level 1. The Mocking Narrator. In many visual novels, the narrator usually stays in the background, simply describing what is happening. But in The Coffin of Andy and Leyley, the narrator goes beyond that usual role. Instead of being a neutral observer, the narrator actively interacts with the player, sometimes making snide remarks, insulting the player for failed actions, or commenting on situations in the game with irony. This unusual approach adds humor and a special charm, making the experience more memorable and fun. Psychological issues. Ashley grew up in conditions where she lacked attention and care from her parents, which led to the formation of a dependent and unhealthy relationship with her brother Andrew, who became her only source of support and love. This created an excessive attachment to him, which is a classic example of a dysfunctional family dynamic, where a child does not receive enough emotional support from parents and instead seeks it in other, not always healthy, relationships. Ashley's social isolation, limited circle of friends, and betrayal by those around her intensified her sense of loneliness and mistrust, which likely contributed to anxiety and paranoid traits. These factors can also help explain her extreme actions and tendency to choose radical solutions to problems, including violence and threats. In the end, the interactions between Ashley and Andrew, ranging from hostility to tenderness, reflect the complexity and contradictions of their relationship. It is both a source of support and a destructive force in their lives. Overall, Ashley's story is a sad example of how prolonged exposure to negative family and social conditions can lead to serious psychological issues. Cultists. In the grim world of the game, where most characters behave aggressively, the cultists stand out because of their unusual behavior. Despite being secondary characters and not having a major impact on the plot, their relatively friendly attitude makes them memorable. Unlike many others, they do not constantly use foul language or even try to act nicer after realizing they may have behaved badly, for example, becoming more polite after a brief tense interaction. The contrast adds an interesting layer to the game's atmosphere and makes them unique among the rest of the cast. Nemlei Games. The game's developer, who has since faced heavy backlash, also has a small library of other games. They never became especially famous, probably because of their fairly niche appeal and rougher quality. After playing some of them, I noticed a few similarities with The Coffin of Andy and Leyley, so let's quickly go over them. No Good Noelle. This game tells the story of Noelle and Ivy, focusing on their friendship as it gradually falls apart. The player can get two endings, both of which depend directly on the choices made throughout the game. Jack in a Castle. This game follows Marion, a puppet investigating the disappearance of the King of Toybox and the mysteries of a distorted castle. Alongside the plush rabbit bunny, Marion explores the dark corners of the kingdom, facing puzzles and challenges. The player's choices directly affect the story and can lead to different endings. Dystopian. You play as Lynn, a high priest serving the monstrous god Dystopian, while trying to reconnect with a pagan brother. Candy Scabs. Celebrate Void's birthday. That means candy and presents, or facing the consequences. It is a cute yet grim story about two nightmares going after sweets. Level 2. Five Nights at Freddy's and The Coffin of Andy and Leyley. At one point, when Ashley recalls her childhood, we can spot what looks like a possible FNAF reference. On the card she was given, there is a creature that looks very similar to Freddy from Five Nights at Freddy's. The resemblance is pretty strong. The hat, the bow tie, the overall birthday and pizzeria theme all line up. Because of that, there's a good chance that this was meant as a small nod to FNAF. Relatives. By now, the game features some of Andy and Ashley's relatives. First of all, there are their parents, Douglas and Renee Graves. The dad is pragmatic, detached, and from the main character's point of view, a simple pushover. The mom, meanwhile, is neglectful and kind of manipulative, sometimes showing at least a tiny bit of care for Andrew, but never caring about Ashley. However, with the release of Episode 3A, we also meet the siblings' grandparents on Douglas's side. The grandpa and granny appear in the flashbacks. It is implied that they are both religious, and Grandpa often beats up Grandma, who, although she seems to be a kind person, does not try to defend herself. Demons. Demons are a key element of the game. From what we can tell, there are at least two demons in the story. The first one is called Lord Unknown, and the siblings meet him in the very first episode, interacting with him throughout the story. He gives them an amulet which allows Ashley to see prophetic dreams. In addition, a cult has been formed around this demon in the game world. The characters encounter him many times for the plot. The second demon is Something Frightening, also known as Mr. Unknown. He is being summoned by Andrew in the 3rd episode. Among his abilities, there's at least reading thoughts, which he's used on Andy, revealing his memories. By now, we don't know if there are any more demons somewhere in the game's world. Parasitic TV. In the rare moments when the main characters get a chance to rest, we can watch scenes playing on the TV. These broadcasts tell a fairly interesting story, while the reporters openly make snide and offensive comments despite the serious situations they are describing. What makes it even more interesting is that this seems completely normal in that world, since the propaganda is barely reacted to at all. Level 3. Harsh Reality. As you may have noticed, the behavior of both the main characters and the random people they meet often feels strange, exaggerated, or even absurd. But why does it surprise so few people? The answer lies in the nature of the world where the events of the game take place, a dystopia. Simply put, it is a place where life itself has turned into endless suffering, stripped of humanity and filled with fear. In this game, we see how people have almost lost the ability to empathize with others, with the cultists being one of the few exceptions. Compared to everyone else, they seem almost angelic. There are no obvious global catastrophes shaping this setting, especially since the world looks very similar to ours, but it still feels as if society took a wrong turn somewhere and became as bitter and callous as possible. Sinister Company. A sinister company called ToxiSoda locked the main characters away for several months under the pretext of a parasite contamination. That already sounds suspicious, especially since parasites usually do not pose a serious threat to others if proper precautions are taken, such as separate dishes and basic hygiene. On top of that, the protagonists show no obvious symptoms of contamination, which makes the quarantine itself feel questionable from the start. At first, the people trapped there were given food, but later that stopped, effectively leaving them to starve. The discovery of blood types marked on apartment doors, along with documents pointing to organ trafficking and weapon purchases, reveals the quarantine's true purpose. From information shown on the TV and stories told by the mother, we learned that about 10 years earlier, a doctor founded ToxiSoda. Sometime later, this surgeon began spreading rumors that the water supply in the apartments was contaminated with parasites, causing chaos and social breakdown. This same figure also engaged in insurance fraud, allowing people to sell their relatives for money. Mr. and Mrs. Graves were among those who sold their children to the surgeon for a relatively small sum. So the company, which at first seems almost ordinary, turns out to be involved in something far more disgusting. Demonic World. The demonic world is an important part of the game. In Episode 2, Ashley begins having visions and essentially starts connecting directly with the demon. In Episode 3A, the siblings even manage to visit this realm. In an attempt to avoid the police, the brother and sister make a deal with Lord Unknown and gain refuge in the demonic world. Generally, this world allows the game to create different outcomes and more symbolic sequences. Cancellation and doxing of Nemlei. The developer, Nemlei, faced major backlash online. A large part of it grew after the ending of Episode 2, when many players were already upset, and the developer continued to troll the audience with different artworks, further fueling the anger. That eventually turned into something much uglier. Some people started digging for personal information and nearly managed to fully dox the developer. A lot of private details were reportedly uncovered, including a full name, phone numbers, and other personal information that never should have been spread online. Under that kind of pressure, the project was eventually handed over to another studio, Kit 9, who later released the 3rd episode. At the same time, Nemlei still remained involved in the story itself, so development did not completely leave the original creator's hands. Most public-facing activity, however, such as updates and news posts, shifted more towards the studio. And all of this happened largely because of the game's content and the developer's provocative trolling. It is honestly wild that this is now enough to trigger a full-scale harassment campaign, with people trying to expose every private detail that they can find. Even those who simply talked about a situation or criticized the doxing sometimes became targets themselves. So, that was the iceberg. Thanks for watching! Your support really helps a lot, so feel free to leave a comment and a like. Good luck!